You see that? Yeah. It is something that was gifted to me by someone who saw my show. It's a woman's husband's self-image of memory loss, but it was a week after he passed away. They had seen my show and she wanted me to have it, and I just love to tell that story.
Our guest, Samuel Simon, is a man who has spent his life fighting for social change, from his early days as a founding member of Raiders to his decades of work shaping internet and telecommunications policy. But in what he calls the fourth act of his life, Sam is tackling perhaps the greatest challenge yet, living with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Diagnosed in 2021, Sam refuses to let cognitive decline define him. He is an award-winning playwright and actor, using theater as a powerful tool to shift the narrative around dementia, a term he passionately rejects. His autobiographical show, Dementia Man, An Existential Journey, offers an unfiltered look into the patient experience, the challenges of our medical system, and the urgent need for reform in neurocognitive care. Sam is a storyteller, an advocate, and as he proudly calls himself, a troublemaker. Today, we will talk about his journey, his mission to redefine life with cognitive disorders, and what we can all learn from his unwavering commitment to living fully and aging well. Let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your path to becoming Dementia Man.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me. And, it's a weird story in some ways. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, of all places, and very middle class, lower middle class. My dad was a traveling salesman. And in the play, I wrote a play about this. I think Willie Loman, I don't know if you remember The Death of a Salesman, but
I had to read that in school.
My dad would get in a car and we would drive even all the way out to the West Coast in an unair-conditioned Chevy. They take the back seat out. He puts people forget he did in the mid 40s to the late 50s, early 60s. Air traffic wasn't that big. There wasn't the internet. So salesmen went to big regional conferences, or in my case, my dad would go to small towns, take out his bags of children's and infants wear. And I grew up there. Not sure what I wanted to do with my life. Ended up getting married very young. Susan was 20, I was 21, and went to law school and ended up, unlikely, my parents wanted me to stay in the Army, and I actually have a brother-in-law. My oldest sister married a West Point guy who retired as a major general. And they said, stay in the Army or work for the government, it's safe. Because they had grown up in the Depression. Anyway, I'm telling you too much. Anyway, and go to law school. And as a kid, I sort of became a troublemaker even as a kid. Good trouble in the sense I got mad at the city council of El Paso, and at 14 went down and told them the curfews were unconstitutional and they shouldn't have an 11 p.m. curfew for kids 17 and under. Anyway, and I ended up going to law school, and it feels like it's almost a gene of when something seems unjust, the temperature rises in me. It seems almost something I can't control. But in an unlikely event, one of our classmates was Ralph Nader, people. It's been a while. He's still alive. He still does a weekly podcast. Ralph Nader was just getting started. He wrote the book Unsafe at Any Speed. And because of him, have airbags and seatbelts and all that stuff. But he was just starting out a Washington law firm. Somebody had worked with him in the summer, a Nader's Raider, is what they called him, and came back to our class and said, Ralph is hiring for some full-time lawyers. I did have a military obligation, but he had come up anyway. And I spent my first year working for Ralph Nader as a Nader's Raider kind of public interest lawyer, one of the first public interest lawyers. And I sort of had a career doing that. So I like to call myself a bit of a troublemaker. But I ended up doing a public affairs company in Washington, D.C. I even have a son now who's going to be 55, and he's a member of the Virginia legislature. We're troublemakers. So I wasn't an actor. I wasn't a performer. we didn't, I didn't see any dementia in my family. We had some folks. I have an aunt, by the way. I'd love to brag about her, who did go into nursing home late in her life. In 1920, she was the 16th woman ever to be a lawyer in Florida. We just new family history. We're troublemakers, all of us. And two things began to happen. I had a career. So I started with Ralph in 1970. Now we're talking about 2006. I had built a public affairs firm. I sold it. I was actually became a senior fellow for a nonprofit in New York. I actually commuted every other week. But I started doing some theater, improv. I love improv. It taught me. I encourage anybody who is interested, even the old people like me. I'm going to be 80 this year. The most important thing I think I've learned in my life was improvisational theater, and in aging, and in the certainly dementia world. There is Teepa Snow. I don't know if you know the name. She's a woman who specializes on how to work with people with dementia in nursing homes, and she uses improv strategies. A yes and. In other words, if somebody has serious dementia and they say we're not home, even though they are, you can't tell them they are. You say, yes, of course you're home. Yeah, of course you're not home. Let's go out and get in the car, drive around the block and go back. We're home now. You can't. Anyway, and so I fell into theater because my wife, and talk about aging, these happens. My wife in around 2000 was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. And the doctors pulled me over and said, get ready. She's not going to make it. Now, she did, unlikely a survivor. And we went through that process of getting ready for somebody, the one you love most in the world. And she survived. And it took me almost 9 years to realize that I hadn't dealt with that issue. And I ended up was doing some of my improv work. And I discovered that I had a story to tell. And that was my first play. And because I happened to be going back and forth to New York, I wrote a play called The Actual Dance, Love's Ultimate Journey, from the caregiver. You talk about the aging journey. A whole lot of us are either get sick and we have somebody care for us, or we have our partners or family members and they begin to get ill and we care for them. It is almost inevitable roles for many, many people. And I was what I call love partner. That was my name for it. I came to understand that there are two parts of that. There's a care partner where I actually had to give her care. Sometimes I had to give her shots in her stomach and learn how to do that. My heart was breaking. So we're a love partner. So we have those two parts of that role. She gets well. I keep doing things in New York and back. And I wrote my play about that journey. I was performing my play. And all of a sudden I start driving on the wrong side of the road every now and then. And all of a sudden I can't remember things. I start getting lost. I can't remember things. My internist, when I complained, and it was a couple of years I was complaining, he said, Sam, you're just an overeducated man overreacting to normal aging. And so we kept doing that. Then I'm getting into the subject of the play, but anyway, I discovered that it was early stage Alzheimer's. We can go into a little bit more detail. And that's where we are now, writing a play and performing a play with Alzheimer's disease. You get a diagnosis of a terminal disease, and the first question is, what do I do? It's so tempting to curl up and go into your room and don't come out. Actually, one of my first performances, somebody in the audience, we do a discussion afterwards. One of the first people who spoke, I can still see the woman stand up and say, my husband was diagnosed, and he came home and he went in his room and he didn't come out. It's her words. And that was figurative, that's my story I'm sticking to. And we can talk some more about the play, but in so many ways, I was this Ralph Nader advocate, public affairs guy in Washington. I got a little publicity, when I was doing that back in the late 90s and late 90s. I was on Face the Nation, Good Morning America, Today Show. He was even on the Oprah Winfrey Show once. And my son called me a minor celebrity back then. But I just, I could never imagine being here doing this in life. I don't know how, stories of growing up and becoming something you never imagined.
So it seems like when you got your diagnosis, you did the opposite of going into your room and not coming out. Is that the
Yes,
case?
just the opposite. Well, I talk in the play and I talk about my life. I started troublemaker. I had a background. I worked in, very visible, very visible. Even as I started working, doing the Ralph Nader work in public, I taught a couple of things and still probably advice today. If you're starting in a new field and you're trying to be an advocate, raise your hand, be noticed, talk. And, like I said, at 14, I'm down at the city council meeting telling them that their curfew is unconstitutional. And I always had that personality. I've been loud a bit. I've done that a couple of times. I don't know if I need to. A couple of times in my life where I'm all of a sudden the loudest guy in the room. And often that way they handle it is, all right, you be president of the board or you take on that task. So, and when I was diagnosed with Alzheimer, I had been doing the play about Susan, about being the care partner. And so I had developed a theatrical cohort. I call them there's this big conference every January in New York. They usually don't have people like, again, I went to it every year for about 5 years. I had other actors who knew my work, knew my play. I started telling people that my first diagnosis was mild cognitive impairment, known as MCI. And that was in 2018, wasn't until 2022 that I got the Alzheimer's, why I was mildly cognitively impaired, because I had early stage Alzheimer's. And they were telling me, said, write about it, take it, put it on the page and on the stage. That's what actors do, particularly solo actors. It didn't register at first, and mild cognitive impairment wasn't all that bad. It explained a few things of what was going on. The Alzheimer's was a little bit harder. It took a minute. It took a minute. We have 2 adult children. Of course, I love to say one's a lawyer and a legislator now, but one's a lawyer. The other one, therefore, has to be of course, she's a pediatric dentist, a doctor. And we talked to our children, and, I guess I didn't know what else to do in some ways. I didn't want, and I had the experience of writing about an existential matter. I mentioned I was working with I worked part-time in New York every other week. It was with a social justice ministry, a nice Jewish boy. But I went and worked with the social justice ministry of the Collegiate Church of New York, the oldest church in America. And a friend had taken it over. And we were using theater and art and music around social change. And I had experienced and saw, and I still believe now, and now I believe, people can be persuaded by emotion more than theory. You can write this policy paper and send it to somebody and they'll read it. But if you can give them an opera or a show or something that hits them in their heart, they'll think differently or they'll maybe reconsider. And so I had seen that and done that. I had this encouragement, and I had people I'd worked with about the other play, and it wasn't again obvious to me. I'm learning now. I've entered the whole universe of people with cognitive decline, cognitive impairment. The baby boomer generation and their children. It's huge that are confronting cognitive or just late in life diseases, and we're living with the Dr. Alzheimer's narrative, and people don't know what that is. It's almost a Frankenstein idea of what somebody would, reminded when we, growing up, cancer wasn't mentioned as a word. It was the C word. Now we have this terrible word, dementia, and it is based on the idea that there's sort of this late stage version of the disease, of the person sitting in a nursing home with a kind of look on their face. And that is late stage. My neurologist, when I got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, said it could be 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years before I got a lot worse. I'm 7 years into it, and I'm, beginning to feel it more. I know a clock is ticking, but there are so many of us in these earlier stages. And if I have anything I want to do, it's possible to live a meaningful, purposeful life with this disease. And then you may know there's a counter narrative. And I feel like I'm just talking about it.
That's what you're here for.
But one of my motives actually was I was exercising one day listening to a podcast, maybe like a good podcast. But the guest was a person who'd written a book. I'm not going to give them credit. I don't like to talk. But the book was about how this woman's husband was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's, my diagnosis. And she quotes him as saying, "I don't want to die, but I don't want to continue to become a lesser and lesser person." And the rest of the book, it was how hard it was for them to get to Switzerland so he could kill himself with poison. And there is a narrative in support of that choice. And I want to be the opposite voice, that life with this disease is worth living, that we can still continue to lead a meaningful, useful life and do things. And there's a whole new movement. I've just learned this, and I'm making connections with them in senior living homes and in senior living around the Montessori method. And it's like, I thought that was for grade school kids in the rich side of the house. And Montessori, which I did not understand, is about working with people. In this instance, in grade schools and schools, it's see a child's natural inclinations and work with that. Lead with, if they're a good typist or if they're a good actor or if they athletic, teach them through that and let them develop their own strengths. They're beginning to apply that idea to people with dementia, with cognitive decline. I was talking to somebody on a podcast, my own podcast with somebody, and they were joking because they were familiar with this. They said, "Well, if you came to our place, we would put you in charge of the drama club in the memory unit. They would have a drama club, even for those." And so what I hope I can be part of is helping people reimagine this journey, even with cognitive issues. So that's sort of my story at the moment, what I'm trying to do. You're on the West Coast, but your podcast is everywhere, right?
Yes. Yeah. We're, I think, on almost every continent. One or two people, but yeah.
Are you familiar with there's a big conference coming up in April in Florida called On Aging?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm going to be there. That's what I'll mention. Maybe people here, I had never heard of it. It's called On Aging, and I have a room April 20th at 5:00. If anybody who listens is going to be at the On Aging conference, come say hello. But that's more. This is what's happening to America, it's a huge cohort of, and I want to be part of this movement that you can live even in impaired ways, even as your own health changes. I don't like the word deteriorates, changes. And you can find joy, you can find meaning, you can find purpose, you can help each other. You can be in a drama club and have maybe even mid-stage Alzheimer's. But anyway, so that's my energy and that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, we don't ever hear of people talking about middle stage Alzheimer's. I just realized that. It's like either early stage or late stage. There's never talk about the middle stage. And
it is a process. And it is a process. It can change quickly sometimes, and sometimes it's slow. There's a consensus right now with my wife and my neurologist that my doing this work is slowing down the progress. That my energy and working at this, by the way, I was looking to see if I had it. I don't have it with me. I carry the script in my hand, but I can't memorize. I memorized the first play. I would boom, 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 an hour play, memorize. That was no problem. And in fact, one of the symptoms during the pandemic, I was still doing the other play, the actual dance, but I was doing it from home now. Had my phone and I was able to perform over Zoom for a lot of the breast cancer clubs around the country, Gilda's clubs. And it was actually fortunate by Susan, my wife would sit on the side. She would have the script, but usually that wasn't an issue. But I started missing my lines, forgetting lines. So she could cue me off from the side. Now, even though I carried the script on stage, so I refer to it more than I think when I see videos of me on stage when it's done. So I'm looking down too much. But anyway, so now Susan carries the script and sits in the first row. I call her my cognitive navigator. And, there's a big advocacy piece in my work, by the way. And I can transition to that because I want to get rid of the word Alzheimer's. And there is a movement. There is a delete the D word or get rid of the D word. I did not know this. Federal government cannot use the word retarded in federal documents. Congress passed a law that says you can't do that. There's a group of people headed by this gentleman out of Iowa who are putting together a lobbying effort. It says, and you can't use the dementia word. You need to use the medical world has even changed it. It's called the DSM-5, which is the neurology book on how to classify diseases, called neurocognitive disorder, major or minor. 2013, they changed it. So I'm with them. I want to get rid of the word. I used to be active in the disability movement. I was on the board of directors of the World Institute on Disability for 15 years. I was even vice chair of the board once. America, right? You have curb cuts for people with wheelchairs, millions of them. You have ramps into every public building. You have Braille on the elevator doors. What do you have for me? Right now, not anything. And the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, was amended in 2008, to include cognitive disorder accommodations. So I want businesses, particularly interfacing with the public, to have a cognitive disorder desk, or I'm going to get something here real quick. And I'm back. I don't know if you've seen this before.
No, I haven't.
You can get it at an airport. If you have a cognitive disorder, it says hidden disability. And in Europe, at airports and train stations, they have a desk with big yellow flower. So if you have a disease and you're there, you have a cognitive disease, you can go up and get help. Increasingly at airports now, you can get these. And we had an experience where I was traveling to Iowa for a performance. We were coming back. I was wearing this as we were in the airport. Susan and I put my bag in. I moved forward. My wife's behind me. The TSA agent sees me, looks at her and says, "Are you with him?" She said, he says, "Yes." He says, "I'll take care of your bags. You go stay with him." So they know. But what about when I go, I can still go to the grocery store, but it's going to take me a little longer. I won't remember where anything is anymore. I'm going to need a bit of help. So again, in this Iowa community, they're working with grocery stores to have carts with a yellow sign with flowers on front of it and a checkout line that, right now there are still a few checkout lines left. And, one can have the sign so that you don't slow up everybody else and they can take time within, know that they don't get, the person helping you doesn't get frustrated. But you can do that almost anywhere in any environment, because just as we forget that there is mid-stage, I can stay more engaged in the community for much longer if there is just a little help. And so that's part of my advocacy. I want cognitive navigators as available as curb cut. I want to get rid of the D word, and I'm a strong voice against accompanied suicide. So,
absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. But I teach a course in exercise. It's pathophysiology and exercise. And so you have just informed me I need to stop using the D word. And for some of our listeners that are listening to this as opposed to watching it, they didn't see your air quotes. I use air quotes a lot too, so I always have to express that I'm using air quotes around dementia. And I like the neurocognitive companion or assistant. What was the term you used there?
Navigator, neurocognitive companion.
I got to start adopting that a little bit more too, and really expressing to my students how important it is because I have a lot of students that can go on into physical therapy, physician assistant programs, occupational therapy. And that's why I love teaching exercise science and having people going into professions like that, because they have a little bit greater training in regards to kind of the social interactions. I teach my students that, all conditions that we're dealing with are biomechanical, psychosocial. And if we don't address that psychosocial piece or understand that there's more going on in the person's life than just this condition or their need for this particular exercise or whatever it might be, we're going to miss them dramatically. And I love these terms. I'm learning a lot today.
Cognitive navigator, right? Not neurocognitive. It's cognitive navigator. Shorthand CN. She's my CN. My cognitive navigator. Sorry, I misstated it.
Oh, that's okay. You're allowed to misstate stuff. I misstate stuff all the time. So what were some of the biggest changes you had to make in your daily life after your diagnosis?
Oh, well, a couple of things are going on. One of the biggest issues was driving. Now, I still drive, but rarely alone. The risk of getting lost is moderate, but increasingly, and I worry about it. And so I actually pushed my neurologist to give me a prescription to be tested by a vocational training organization. And they do that. I should have done it earlier, but they have a system in Virginia, and I suspect every other state, that I'm going to put this on move Sam, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Maybe you can do that. One of my accommodation, Alexa, just remind, well, I'll let you listen to it.
Sam, here is your reminder. Take my pills.
So I have Alexa remind me every morning to make sure I've taken my morning medication. To be current, I need to add the evening because I forgot to take my pills last night. I hated it. Pisses me off because not until this morning I went to take my morning medicine and there's the pills from last night. I didn't do it again. You want to know one of the things that's real time, my friend, real time. But, so driving, I took the test. I had to take it twice. I surprised myself. They said you can continue driving, but on distances, make sure there's somebody in your car, finding directions. I don't say first remembering where I left things, put my keys, because, you say that and the first thing is, oh, I've done that too. We've learned there is a difference, and somebody suggested to us being Susan and me, that the difference between me and my wife is she can retrace her steps and find it. I can't retrace my steps. I won't remember where I put my keys or my wallet. I won't know where I had been. So I can search everywhere, which is what I end up doing, except we have set places. This is where it belongs. And Susan works and we change, we accommodate, even, again, because it's so current, because it's happened today, literally. Susan realizes, my wife, that she has to affirmatively remind me to take my evening pill, that we can't just assume that it's happened. And and the frustration to me is I don't understand how it happens. They're sitting right where I brush my teeth, right next to it. And I did that. I went through everything. I went to but I didn't. And I don't remember why I didn't. Why wouldn't I? They're there. I do it every night or almost every. And so again, the difference between the occasional, I forget this, and me is there's nothing there when it happens. And so these are some of the symptoms. And, traveling, I used to, like I mentioned earlier, I used to travel to New York every other week. I'd go up on a Monday, come back on a Friday. I'd stay at a hotel. I'd get on the train. I'd go alone. Travel now has built such anxiety in me that, it's hard. And we have to travel a day earlier. Like when I perform, I travel an extra day earlier just to get over the anxiety that builds in just traveling. And these are all new things. And I don't read nearly as much. I used to read a book a week. And again, it's something you notice. It's not like intention. It's all of a sudden I'm not doing it. I love to read. I love stories. I just don't know why it doesn't happen. But I can't perform my play. I love doing my play. Again, it's not memorized. I have to be on book. And the time, the clock is ticking. We had to make an affirmative decision. So I started in the July of 2023. And so we went through half of 23, all of 24. And we had to make a decision. Should I keep even trying for 2025? I don't like to book things and then all of a sudden I can't do it. We feel I can get through that, but we have to be alert and aware every time. And I look to others to notice, by the way. I'm not the best judge of my own cognitive health. And so that's why I'm very lucky. Susan and I'll tell you, I used to do a podcast with my granddaughter because she complained that Grandpa always went deep. Grandpa's about to go deep. There's something very fortunate about our journey. I had to get ready very actively to hold Susan. I thought she'd take her last breath. And now our roles are switched. I'm not imminent, but this is not curable. And so I think we both would agree. We both thought there is a gift in being able to be of comfort and hold somebody you love as they face the end of life. And it is a gift to each other. It's not just one way. Now, it is not easy. The care partner journey, and I'll talk about that in a second, is difficult. But they're underneath it. And just talk to somebody else. What bigger gift to be able to let somebody know as they take their last breath that they are loved. They are loved to their core. What a bigger gift can you give to anybody? And what gift can you give to allow that person to feel that way? It's a mutual gift. It's not easy to get there, but I think we're lucky that we found that. You might call luck that Susan almost died from breast cancer and I'm an incurable disease now. Well, what's lucky is that we can live the life with it in this way. And that's, if anything, I want to be able to offer is these ideas to others. That is, unhappy as we may be, as shocking as it is at the moment, that there is the possibility of finding meaning and joy and love, particularly. And it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could be a parent, a child to a parent. What a gift to be able to do that to your mother or father. Like, I know there are all sorts of other things out there in other relationships, but anyway, you got me, and I forgot where I was going.
Going deep, like your granddaughter said.
Yeah, Grandpa goes deep.
Yeah. So what kind of reactions have you gotten from your audiences, both from those experiencing cognitive decline and from their loved ones?
Well, I've learned this sounds odd, but I discovered this when I did my first place. I learned from, first of all, my own performances. I understand my own story differently, and I learn from audiences. And one of the first things I never anticipated, and still is one of the frequent first comments, is, "Thank you, Sam. I've always wondered what my father, uncle, whoever, how their mind might have been working. And now I think maybe I understand it a little bit." I don't think we've talked about yet the biggest cognitive experience, and maybe I should stop and mention, because the thing that got everybody excited, or I'd say excited, concerned, was when I began to develop a phenomena, and it's sort of the theme of the play, that the entire right side of my brain, when I started trying to remember things, I would have like two tiny eyes in the front of my forehead, inside, would turn to the right. This sounds crazy. So all right, where am I going tomorrow? All right, where am I going tomorrow? Eyes right, look for the answer, and instead there's like outer space. There's an infinite black place that I literally fall into, looking for that answer, and then I'm back. And so that doctor who said, "Oh, you're just a overeducated man overreacting to normal aging," as soon as I told him about that, that's when he got me to a neurologist. And so the play is about disappearing into infinity. I should have been, Sam. It is about disappearing into infinity. I'm taking the medicine that stops that. I don't remember, but this sense of floating in intergalactic space. I'm literally, in the real world, I'm sitting in a chair, writing or thinking or in front of somebody. But in the moment, in my head, I gave it a name, the nothingness place. I'm just sitting in infinity. And it's probably, a nanosecond, a second, a minute, I don't know. People don't even notice it. Now the pill has gotten rid of the phenomena. It doesn't add, so now you remember everything. No, I just don't go there. And it scared me and it frightened me. And a story, quick, I was getting diagnosed and I went for a second opinion, and I went to, there's a Georgetown hospital here, has a very well-known memory clinic. They were there for my second opinion. The honcho guy, head of the clinic, memory clinic's got his intern there, a doctor who's going through getting certified as a neurologist. She looks at me, and after I tell the story, she says, well, was that real? Was that a real nothingness place? Or I called it a wall. Was that a real wall, or was it a hallucination? And my instant reaction was, it was real. And then I go, oh, of course, there wasn't a real wall there. I said, no, I guess it was a hallucination. But that, we should have started with that. Sorry. That was the biggest symptom that sent me for the diagnosis and then treatment. And medicine is taking that particular thing away. Hadn't added the memory, I still can't remember these things when I'm looking for it. But I don't end up floating in outer space and not knowing where I am for whatever short moment that is. Maybe we should go back and start this thing over.
No, this has been awesome. I mean, it's so informative for me because, we can talk and, we've had people on the podcast that are, medical doctors, experts in the area of cognitive degenerative disease and getting better.
Yeah.
And, we can get it from that perspective, but you're the first person I've had on here that can really educate our listeners and our viewers on the perspective of this is what it's like going through this particular condition. And so I really appreciate, I don't care how many different stories or divergent paths you go on today, I'm absorbing this and I'm loving it. And
so we were back to audience. So hearing that from audiences, that's, so when I had that in the show, people say, now I think I understood maybe what was going on in the mind of my loved one or something like that. So that's one of the reactions. They pick up that it's a love story. It gives people, I hear them say that gives them energy to keep on the thing. I do want to say that the care partner, the cognitive navigator, so again, the privilege. I was that for my wife. It was not easy, but Susan was always Susan. She wouldn't allow anybody to be sad in front of her. I mean, she pushed us out of the room. My daughter would say, I had to go into my car to cry. I had to go on her front porch to cry when I needed to cry. We couldn't do it in front of her. But she was tough and determined, and she was, her courage and her determination helped us. But the journey for the care partners in the love partner, in neurocognitive diseases and cognitive decline dementia is magnitude of orders more challenging. I've seen it. I can hear it. And so I honor my wife for doing it. I've seen that because line in the play. I wonder what I may disappear. The opening line in the play is, so this is how it ends. So I'm not going to die. I'm just going to go away, transform, become someone. And Susan's going to stay with that someone else. And I don't, later on I say, I wonder what the Sam of me then will know about the Sam of me now. This is not hypothetical, my friends. There is a ton of stuff. There was an article in the New York Times about two sons. They were doctors of their dad, who had been a doctor, who said, I don't want to, if I ever get Alzheimer's, don't treat me because I don't become like them. Well, doctor's son gets Alzheimer's, gets sick, and now the sons have to say, should we treat him? He has pneumonia. Their dilemma? He was in a senior living center, had a new girlfriend, and he was living the good life with the disease. But we can't imagine that. We don't know that. So their advice, but people can be agitated. People can, with the disease, and it can get very hard. I'm thinking about it, so I'll mention it. So what do you do if the challenge gets too hard? I think that right now is one of the biggest dilemmas in this disease, because our country does not provide strong support for families in this circumstances. If you want to go into a memory clinic in a senior living facility, you probably know this. There's a brand new one in our neighborhood. You have to put down between $600,000 to $4.5 million, because we've went and visited to see if it was something we were interested in. And they're $11,000 to $12,000 a month. There was a obituary of someone I knew from way back in the 90s. He'd been a well-known political consultant and moved out to Santa Fe. It was an obituary. He'd gone to Switzerland. And he said he did not, and he went to Switzerland to kill himself. He said, I'm getting to that phase. I don't want to be a burden, an overwhelming burden to my family. We shouldn't have to kill ourselves because we can't afford to be sick. And I don't have a good answer to those families and those dilemmas. I don't know what to do. Luckily, we're not facing that, though we are having to decide, should we find someplace? Should I go into a memory center or should we move into a senior living with a memory center? If you wait too long, as we have, and already have a diagnosis, you can't get into their best financial plan. Or not financial, called lifelong life something program where they'll give you a price when you come in and you're guaranteed to keep it until you, even if you get, but we're finding it out. Turns out there's a new Sunrise Living Center walking distance from our home. It's a memory center. Maybe if I have to go someplace, I'll go to the memory center and Susan could walk and see me, or, there are adult daycare facilities. I did my show for the national conference of the Association of Adult Daycare Providers. They're going to grow and big. So at the show, I was surprised at how well it's received, how people react to it, how many people are facing this now, are beginning to face it. And there are growing number of patient-based organizations. There's a dementia-friendly movement in the United States that came from Europe. And my favorite place is called The Joy of Dementia, and Reimagining Dementia, taking it to the streets. And it's in Brooklyn. She's a good friend, and Mary Fridley, gives courses on this, how to live a meaningful and joyful life, and how to let people know we're around. Hey, here I am. I'm real. Right? I love that, taking it to the streets. That's a new thing. There are others that are more just, having a lot of Zooms with other. Susan and I go to a Friday Zoom. We wanted to find the best Zoom. Where's the best Zoom to have a support group for us here in McLean, Virginia? Well, the one we found is in Las Vegas, Nevada. Wow. A lot of the senior living facilities have support groups because they want you to go live there. They're marketing things more than, and that may be unfair, but that's how we've experienced it. That's why we like this particular group, and it's for people with the disease and their partners. So there are some resources, but the audiences love it. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know it. I had no idea. And so I love it. I mean, it's so meaningful to me to know that I have something to offer. As I go through, we were calling it late stages of life. Mine's this. There are all sorts of other things. Maybe I'm going to turn 80 this year. Maybe I'm going to be lucky enough. I don't know if it's lucky or not. I want to be 120, but something else. Maybe it won't be this.
I have a blog that I've titled Carpe Memento, and it's a theme in life. So just no matter what's going on, you got to just live in the moment and go from there.
You can. Yeah. I mean, you have to make the best of whatever comes your way. So Susan and I, on that point, work at that. So what do I mean? New Year's Eve, we actually talk about, no, we're not going to go there. We're not going to be, oh my God, how bad are you going to get this year? No, we're going to talk about how great this year is going to be and what we can do. And we have to be intentional about it. We have to, I'm using my hand, wish off those energy or down energy things that can pop up there. And no more why me's. That was a big thing in breast cancer. Why me? Why? The answer is it is me. I can't change this. And even if I knew by the way, I have a genetic risk. My father's mother's side of the family have the APOE4 genetic risk. I have one instance. Who knew? I'm not mad at them. They didn't, people can, and we occasionally run into that, but not much. And I want to be a voice for live the day the best you can. That doesn't mean you don't make plans. That doesn't mean to ignore the obvious, take risk. But I also run into people who say, I don't want to know. That's one of the things, that's the counter. The big thing in medicine, by the way, is that there are new medicines. They can slow the progress. They can't cure it. The earlier you're diagnosed, the better. The more you know your genetic risk, the better. Again, if you want to be current, I talked to somebody yesterday in this business with a foundation around Alzheimer's, and I don't know any more of that, who had parents and grandparents with Alzheimer's. And I asked her, well, have you been checked to see if you have a genetic risk? She said, well, I don't want to know. How can you not want to know? Well, we said, well, I can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. You can begin living that life. You can begin changing lifestyles that help a little bit. You're right. It's not curable. And this is my other advice to people on why they should find out. There is a possibility that there is something with me or with you that will help medicine move the day of the cure for this disease, maybe just by a nanosecond. But I'll take whatever gift I have to give. Maybe it's by a day. Maybe it's bigger. But if I can, in that process, maybe they find something that will help me. But in that process, by being involved, that's why I was in a drug test. And I signed up, drives my wife crazy. I signed up for every study of the brain. They come and ask you to do, there's someplace, they just want to trace my handwriting and my eye movement. I don't know. Okay, I'll do it for you. If I can be of help in that, what bigger gift can we have to the world? Us, little me, maybe have something that can save millions of lives eventually, just by a day. Imagine that. You can add a day onto 1 million people's lives. A good day. I don't know. Sorry. That's an exaggeration. But
no, I don't think it's an exaggeration at all. I wholeheartedly agree with you that, if you can add a day to your life, how much more impact can you have that you might not even be aware of?
Right. And to other people's lives, though, by being part of and I don't know whether, I talked about that woman whose book where they went to, I said that about it. Maybe his name was Brian, by the way, this woman's. Maybe Brian had something unique about him that would help science or find the cure for me. But we'll never know. And of course, the odds are maybe not. I don't. I will tell you one other story. And I don't know how much time you have left, but when I was letting people know, I was on a phone call with some guys. There was a phone call, and we have a group of guys who have a call and I let them know I had Alzheimer's. He said, one of the guys said, I have an aunt who has Alzheimer's in the memory unit. I visit her once a month. I talk for a half an hour, and I leave. I've been doing it for 3 years. The last Wednesday I went. It's been 3 years. I started to leave. She turned to me, thanked me by name for coming to visit her. Said I was stunned because every other meeting she just sat there and stared. We don't know what goes on behind that blank face. Now, maybe science has some thoughts and can tell you what goes. I still don't think we know. So living a meaningful life with the disease, taking what happens to you, particularly if it's inevitable. And then I always like to give a shout out to my once former, I'm going to say this with a smile on my face, girlfriend. I was married, but her name was Lynn Fielder. Lynn was on the board of directors with me at the World Institute on Disability. And somehow we developed, friendship. And the first time I met her, she insisted taking me to lunch. And she said, I'm not poor Lynn with Parkinson's. I'm not, poor Lynn, you've got that ugly disease called Parkinson's. She died at 62 with the disease. But she always said, no, I am Lynn with Parkinson's, and I'm going to be the best Lynn with Parkinson's the world has ever seen. So her gift to me was, I'm Sam with Alzheimer's, and I will be the best Sam with Alzheimer's the world has ever seen. I'm not poor Sam. Why did I have to get it? And it's hard. It's not, but I'm so lucky to have met Lynn. I just like to always give her a shout out. But it is this idea. How do you live a meaningful life with what you're given, whether you want it or not? But you can do it. It's not always easy. And the biggest unresolved problem for me in this journey and for people is the unaffordability that becomes of it and how it can ruin. I mean, we haven't talked about it. It can ruin a family if they don't have enough resources. And, people, I don't have a good answer when somebody will say, I have 2 kids or 3 kids and we have a little money to help them get along and we want to leave them something, but it'll all be gone. And if they have to take care of us, it may bankrupt them too. And I don't want to do that. And I'm not so full of myself to say I have a good, I don't want them to have to kill themselves. I don't think anybody should ever have to be in that position. I think our society, AKA the government, needs to be in a position to make sure that never happens.
So do you have any ideas from your decades of advocacy, what needs to change in how we approach, I'm going to just say the disease instead of saying Alzheimer's or dementia, and any of these, more neurocognitive disorders at a more policy level?
Well, I think, look, Medicare pays for a breast navigator. Nobody pays for a cognitive navigator. You have to hire somebody. That's one of those costs. That could help a lot right now. They just get it covered. Somebody's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you need outside help, however we defined it. That outside help gets paid through Medicare. It's typically, or whatever the government program. It's society taking care of the least of us. Every religion has that. Every ethical system has that. So that is a good start, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, or something unique for this disease, that the financial burden isn't so heavy. And then putting more into research. And I love the idea of dropping the word dementia, so it helps build words and language of dignity. And the idea that we, respect for elders and those in our community. I mean, that's, to me, my most immediate.
And that's not necessarily a policy thing. That's something that each of us individually can advocate for and just change our own personal behavior toward older individuals. I think we have really failed the aging population in this country in so many different ways. I think, one, that we just don't respect aging in this country. We think aging is just, it's expected. You're going to have cognitive and physical decline. So there's nothing we can do about it. We'll just throw some pills at it. And we spend billions of dollars on research that's ineffective in terms of treating these. I know I had Charles Pillar on recently, who did an expose on the research that, basically is falsified research in Alzheimer's, where they've spent so much money chasing down, just falsifying data to support the amyloid hypothesis and not really looking at what can we be doing not only to treat the disease, to prevent the disease, but more importantly, how do we deal with it once it happens? And we spend so much money on the treatment side of things without really dealing with how we manage the conditions.
We need to keep investing as a society in research and in studies. And I think that's one of them. And being willing to do that and, respecting, dignity, that's policy too. It's not just government policy. It's also social policy. And we have a narrative going on into the in our society that works against that right now. And everybody has a role in trying to help this change.
Kind of last thing, where can our listeners learn more about you and find where you're performing? Do you have a website?
DementiaMan.com is the place, and it has all sorts of things. We even have merchandise now. We have puzzles are great. And it has a calendar, and that's a good. The calendar is there. The everything you need to know about Dementia Man. I do a weekly podcast, and it's on YouTube. And on the last page, if people want to sign up to get an email that the blog's up, they can do it on the contact me page. There's a place to sign up.
We'll provide links to all of that. And I'm going to have to get you back on here. Let's kind of get some regular updates in terms of, what's happening. Are you going to change your name when we get, we ban the word dementia? You're going to have to be.
You're not the first person to notice. In fact, early on, somebody once said, if you hate that word so much, how come you call your play Dementia Man? And the answer is, that's the word that's out there for now. And I'd love to be able to call it the Cognitive Decline Man or the CN, or not CN Man. Well, we'll come up with the word, the cognitively impaired man, the memory trip, the memory journey. I don't know.
We'll work on that by the next time we have you on here.
We'll have a contest, and the people have to and the winner will get a title on the play. How's that?
Sounds great. Well, this again has been awesome. I'm looking forward to actually sharing this episode with my students and helping them to better understand the D word a little bit better. And, just keep doing what you're doing. Normally, and it sounds kind of odd to say keep aging well, but, despite the fact that you are battling this degenerative disease, I'd have to say you're aging well.
But you know something, Jeff? I love the title because it is the goal. By definition, we're going to age. Age means we get older, and we all have the same end. We can do every part of that well if we work at it. If we have models available, if we talk about it, and that's what you offer.
And you too.
Yeah. Let's keep it up.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. All right.
Warmed me today.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.